That 49-51 News poll figure is fascinating. I always look at the primary vote, and my rule of thumb now for more than a decade has been that the coalition needs a primary vote of 42 to be in with a winning chance. They have lifted it to 39, but they're still 3 short then from that magic 42 number. The fascinating difference this time, though, is the joint influence of Pauline Hanson and Clive Palmer. They were not a factor in the last election, but are polling 8 points together now. What percentage of their preferences will flow to the coalition? This changed dynamic means there is a possibility the coalition could win with a primary vote as low as 40. The coalition needs to pick up at least 4 seats, and it already looks likely that they'll be able to pick up seats in New South Wales, Queensland, the Northern Territory and Tasmania. But of course they could also lose other seats in Queensland and New South Wales and perhaps elsewhere. The election could well come down to how many electorates the coalition loses in the one state of Victoria. The major stories today: Scott Morrison and Bill Shorten both campaign in New South Wales marginal seats ahead of Saturday's election. First home owners, of course, first home buyers are set to benefit from election promises as both leaders back this policy to alleviate deposit pressures. And as Sri Lankan Catholics head back to church for the first time since the terror attacks, Christians are murdered in an attack in Burkina Faso. Now back to the election, and Bill Shorten has been screaming about News Corp bias against him. I'll have more to say on that in Kenny on Media tonight at 8 o'clock, but let me share a couple of examples of media bias. First up, remember the Queensland worker early in the campaign who asked Bill Shorten if higher income earners could get a tax break too? Here's the exchange.
Tax break. So a lot of the guys here do overtime. They earn $250,000 a year because they work nights. Well, we're going to look at that.
This created a major embarrassment for Shorten because he pretended he would look at doing something. But his actual policy is to immediately increase income tax by 2% for high income earners. There was nothing wrong, of course, with the worker's question. It wasn't his fault Shorten gave a misleading answer. But the worker has lost his job at the government-run Gladstone port all the same. The father of 3, a well-paid contractor, was dumped, apparently for talking to the media. He asked the alternative Prime Minister a legitimate question. That's not talking to the media. Anyway, where is this media bias when it comes to this issue? Well, this cracking yarn was broken by Renee Valaris in the Courier Mail today. She'll join me later in the program, actually, but you won't find any reference to this worker's sacking, this worker's plight, on the ABC News website, or for that matter, on the 9 Media newspaper sites. That's the media bias. Embarrassing stories for Labor, they just pretend they never happened. Also on the ABC, Radio National this morning had Fran Kelly discussing a new opinion poll that showed the Greens doing well in the Melbourne seat of Kooyong, which is held by the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. This polling was commissioned by the Greens, and Kelly interviewed who else but the Greens candidate Julian Burnside, who, despite years of erroneous claims on border protection and horrible slurs, such as calling Tony Abbott a pedophile, remains a long-standing ABC favourite.
How confident are you that Josh Frydenberg can be beaten and that you will be the new member for Kooyong?
Well, Fran, the poll that really matters happens next Saturday. But as you know, I've fought some pretty tough fights in my life. I'm in this one to win it. I believe we can win it, and the feeling on the ground in Kooyong is incredibly strong. The voters in Kooyong have this objective. They all work hard. They all hope to leave something of value to their children. And the most valuable thing anyone can leave to their children is a world where human beings can survive.
This bloke got to talk about how he thinks the survival of the human race is under threat without challenge. He spoke unchallenged about his own polling that he says shows he's doing well. He was not asked about how Australian action can change the climate while global emissions rise. He was not asked about how on earth the Greens can deliver their plan for 100% renewable energy by 2030. This central and ludicrous policy was not even mentioned. let alone any questions just about how practical it is or what it will cost. No mention either of the Greens' long-standing but recently disowned affection for death duties. No questions about the Greens candidate George Hanna in Lingiari, who the party continues to back despite racist social media posts. This is blatant media bias. It favours anyone running a Green left agenda. It runs across much of the media, and especially on the media that you and your taxes pay for.